So we are representatives of Lando, Probo, and Pantheon. And basically, we want to kind of tell you about our workflow, introduce these tools for people who haven't used them before, and maybe give you a little bit more if you have used them before, and kind of how they work together to kind of create a full development to testing to production workflow. Mike is the, I believe, what do you call it, the dictator?
Dictator, yeah, that is my technical position. Benevolent dictator.
The dictator of Lando,
yeah.
Sort of the chief creator of Lando, which is a local development.
Is a local development solution. It is based on Docker and Docker Compose. More than a local development solution, I would say. It's local dependency management, development dependency management. So not just infrastructure, but also tools and automation and deployment steps, pretty much anything that you can sort of script. Any requirement that you can imagine, it sort of can handle.
So he has come down here from the great land of New Hampshire to share that with us today. My name is Jody, and I am the CTO of ZivTech, and I'm here to talk about one of ZivTech's tools, which is a company that we started at ZivTech called Probo. And I am an owner of Probo and a minor developer of Probo. And this is Mr. Matthew Cheney, a co-founder of Pantheon.
Your lovely website hosting platform. And I think we're here today in part because we work on different parts of this workflow that web developers use to make their sites. And I think for someone like Jody, Mike, and ourselves who have been doing web development basically our entire professional lives, like decades plus, we've seen a lot of changes in how this actually ends up working. Probably changes you all have seen in your day-to-day work. That like 10 years ago, the idea of having, compiled CSS or post-processing hooks, or even the idea of running some kind of automated testing suite was like sort of crazy. Like it was like super powerful technology that only very expensive and very, well-financed projects could do. But I think what's happened over the last 10 years of web development is that a lot of the tools and a lot of the processes that used to be just like only for large enterprise, huge projects have been more democratized and have been more, available to people. That like part of like starting Pantheon for me was looking at a world of web hosting where like people didn't have dev tested live out of the box. That wasn't something that was even done very regularly. And building it was very complicated on a one-off basis. But when you can create standard solutions where, building DevTest Live as an infrastructure is hard work, but giving it to like, N+1 people is not actually that hard, so you can have these advantages of scale. Same thing for local development, same thing for automatic testing. And then I think a lot of what we want to talk about today is to try to bring our different perspectives about how this workflow works for development and try to talk about how sort of we do it, show off some examples.
So is anybody here already using Lando? Look at that.
Look at that.
Is anybody using Probo? Okay. Is anybody using Pantheon? Well, I guess I'm the loser in that survey. Glad I did that. Okay. So first of all, let me just give a quick overview for anybody that doesn't know what some of these tools are, especially Probo, which we'll get into each of them a little bit more depth in a minute. So Lando is a local development tool. So it makes it really easy for everyone on your team to have the exact same local development environment without putting in a lot of work to set up their local development environments. It also integrates really well with Pantheon. Probo is a tool that spins up basically disposable review environments that are out there on the cloud, so that you can send these off to your clients or other people on your team and say, check out this URL, what do you think about this, before I merge the code and send it up to the dev environment. So that way people can give you feedback even earlier in the process before you've merged your code and put it somewhere else. And then Pantheon, I think most people know, is a leading Drupal and WordPress hosting platform that also can be used as like a development platform with like dev, staging, and multi-dev environments. So I want to start with like a little bit of a story of how great it is when people kind of standardize on these tools. So I get a lot of frantic calls. Oh, I get a lot of frantic calls, from clients with Drupal sites like, oh, can you help me? Or we're not happy with our vendor. They're not taking care of our site. It has all these problems. I heard that you're the one to go to. Can you take a look at our site and like see if you can fix these things, right? So I say, oh yeah, sure. Well, where is it hosted? Pantheon. Great. Just add my email address in your dashboard. Go over there. Now I'm in. Got access to everything. Then I git clone the repo. And there I see there's a .lando.yaml file. I'm like, oh, that's nice. So I type lando start, do a lando pull. Now I got a local copy of the database. My total time to on-ramp onto this completely new project, 3 minutes. I mean, that's the power of these tools, right? Because you go to the next project and you say, okay, where's it hosted? I think it's on this server. We're not sure how to get you access. It can, not only could it take you 2 weeks to even get access to the server, in some cases, I can't give a client a realistic estimate because they can't even get me access to it to even see anything at all, right? Whereas this client, I was already like telling them how to fix things, within minutes. So that's kind of what this is all about, like saving ourselves time, saving our clients money, being more efficient, getting straight to the point of working on websites without all of this other infrastructure work.
Because like building Drupal websites is hard enough. Just to figure out the different APIs, to deal with the client services, to like actually deliver regular and ongoing value as part of your project. And if you're spending time like sharing passwords over email or trying to get local dev set up, or like looking like fixing stuff that automatic test should have caught like earlier, like you're just wasting a lot of like very expensive time working on these projects. That if you're billing your time by the hour, start to think about how much of that time is setup, how much of that time is like fixing something that could have been checked earlier. And that our view, very much so, is that for common tasks, use common solutions. If we all need healthcare, let's just like give everybody healthcare, make this all work. Like you start doing all these one-off things, and you end up with total insanity. Because we're all trying to get to the same place. We all want to build web development and do really great Drupal sites. So like, be on that top of that stack. Be doing the highest value stuff your intellectual minds want to do. Like build the stuff that your clients need, that you want, your products need. And anything that's like below that is just like plumbing of the internet. Just like let that be solutions that work for everyone. Because there's plenty of really good hosting providers out there that all will solve this problem. If you're managing a bunch of EC2 instances for your website, unless you really like and enjoy that kind of work, well, you could be doing other stuff. And I think we all have different tools that we work on. That's like our jobs and stuff that we work with. But I would say overall, the theme of our presentation is more like you're better off using some other tool that does the work you want to do to try to reinvent your own tools and build your own tools and stuff. Because this is going to take a lot of time, unless it's really your thing.
Yeah, one of the main reasons why we built Lando was essentially just the principle: don't be a masochist. Unless, of course, you're into that. That's okay as well. But there's a lot of like complexity to web development now. Like even if we think about 5 years ago, we didn't use Composer to manage our dependencies. We didn't compile Sass into CSS. We didn't need Node version A on this product and Node version B on this project. We didn't maybe have like a Python backend that was running our Vue.js front end. But this is the complexity that we deal with now. And that's one of the main reasons why we built Lando. Like, you don't want to be doing this sort of thing. You want to be writing your code. You don't want to be worrying about the fact that I only have one version of Node installed on my computer and it works on one of my sites, it doesn't work on my other. Like, these are not problems that you want to solve. These are traps, and they suck. So these are why these tools exist, is to take that complexity and to simplify it in a repeatable way so that you can focus on the things that matter the most to you, which presumably is your application and not that you're running Node 10.3 and not Node 10.4.
So the reason that I started using Lando, we had been using a virtual machine setup for a long time at ZipTech, where we had like an Ubuntu virtual machine we used for our local development. And what I ran into was, like he said, needing different versions of different software for different projects. Because of course, the whole point is always to make your local development environment as much like production as possible to, minimize these surprises.
Yeah, how many people run their production site on man?
Why would you do that?
No, get out of here.
Right, so I would start to run into things like, okay, well, on this project we need PHP 7.1, but this project is not compatible with that. We need a different PHP version, and all of a sudden we have more than one virtual machine. Of course, you can't really run more than one, for your computer starts to heat up a lot. And then, and then with Composer, it's even worse, because if you have the wrong version of PHP, then what's on the server, the dependencies that it's going to get aren't even right. So you need the exact right version of PHP. And then, like you're saying, it's not just PHP. There could be Node. There could be all kinds of other software, Solar, all kinds of things. Really, I want to make sure I have the same versions on my local as I have on my other environments.
And you have to get it right, or there's going to be problems down the line.
Yeah.
And especially in the world of D8 development, Composer is the name of the game for doing assembly of those sites. And looking forward at the roadmap for Drupal 9, they're going to deprecate the whole info.yaml schema and put all of that version information also in Composer. And so if you're not able to be building your Composer packages, incorporating your patches, using those different sources, effectively on your local machine, what hope do you have to try to do it in the cloud? You have to have a whole industrial workflow, there's some kind of an Amazon automation facility. Because things are complicated. You don't want to be the person in your team that can't participate in that larger workflow, because it's really helpful. It makes you work and operate faster.
So what I do is I just have a directory for every site in my sites directory. And then in there, if I want to spin up my local environment, I'm just going to do a Lando start. I already started it, so let me do a Lando stop first. And then I get cool messages, from Mike.
Spent a lot of time on that.
App stopped. Okay, it's that easy. Let me start it back up.
This is using containerization, folks, using Docker containerization. So this is not spinning up a virtual machine or trying to use whatever iOS X or whatever PHP version is here. It's spinning up specific configuration files for each of those different, for a cache server, for a database server, for applications.
Yeah, and containerization generally was sort of the game-changing technology that enabled not only Lando, but Pantheon to a large degree to work as well.
And this is the future of the internet. People are not going to be spinning up virtual machines and trying to be Linux sysadmins, sudo root to make it work. They're going to be running the microservices that they need to run, full stop. And
the thing that makes Lando as configurable as it is a direct result of containerization. Instead of having one giant monolithic VM that has all of our dependencies, we can have smaller, just more discrete components, and we can mix and match the ones as we see fit.
Yeah, and Docker is obviously the brand name. It does has probably the most visibility containerization, but you can do containerization using LXC. You can do other kinds of approaches to make this work.
I think there's a thing called Rocket that still exists, but
it's an emerging space. People are still figuring it out. All the big Google Cloud providers, doing very specific new R&D using things like Kubernetes to manage all this stuff. It's still very early days, and it's very exciting on an infrastructure level. But I would say, at Pantheon, we have folks who work just in infrastructure. That's a very different skill set than PHP web developer. And those skill sets are becoming even more divergent. And so there's excellent career paths inside of the cloud infrastructure, but it's just a different thing than trying to use it'd be like trying to use PHP to do your web hosting application is crazy. We want to separate the concerns.
Okay, so boom shakalaka. I got my everything spun up here. I usually use this one. Let me open that link. I like to do my local development HTTPS to, again, minimize my surprises. I like to do HTTPS the entire time, not like I'm turning SSL on the day of launch, surprise. So, of course, this is not a real domain, so I just have to press this one.
You can, however, tell your macOS keychain, if you're using macOS, to like whitelist the certificate authority that Lando provides and eliminate those browser warnings.
So then here I have my local site. So this site, we're doing development on our favorite platform, Pantheon. So here's our dev environment on Pantheon, and here's my local version. So what happens, of course, is once a day or so, I think to myself, I really want to get the latest database from dev because people are updating content. And I just don't like to be out of date. Because again, minimize differences, less surprises, less problems. So what I really like about Lando is the way it integrates with Pantheon. One thing you can do, if you want to get a new database, you just do a Lando pull. And then it will ask me some questions. Where do I want to get the code from? Well, I always put my code in Github. So I just don't ask it for the code from Pantheon. And then I get my database from dev. And I don't like to get the files because I don't have infinite space. I don't have infinite space on my laptop here for like every image that anybody ever uploads. I'm just going to use stage file proxy.
You don't want like their PDFs from like 10 years ago?
No. I don't want any of your PDFs. Why are you even making PDFs? It's a website. Okay, there we go.
The latest version of Lando just released the other day has the most up-to-date version of Terminus also, by the way.
Okay.
Terminus 2.0 game changer, updated APIs, progress bar, better colorization.
Love those progress bars. I just want to know what's happening,
Well, because the thing is, every one of these commands is an abstraction. Like Lando pull is really a command that's like, let's like go access a credential store and like authenticate against like this external service and do a MySQL dump and like get that like database file, like zip it and then like transfer it back to us, unzip it, MySQL dump that back into the database, go out and we get into the connection to do an rsync, pull down the files, make sure we go through all the files, and reset the permissions, and then we're done. It's just a big bash file. The point is that everyone has the same needs to do it. So why not create a tool like Lando pull that just does it and no problem? But doing it with 2.0, even better.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know I was so behind. Okay. So yeah, I'm getting the latest database, and then that's all going to be great whenever that is done. The other thing I like about the Lando Pantheon integration stuff, let me look at my code base. Tell me this is like tiny. Okay, here's my Lando YAML file. Oops.
Drupal 8 introduced the YAML file. It's like a cleaner
Yeah.
JSON.
So actually, Lando, Probo, and Pantheon are all using the same pattern here, where you're just shoving a YAML file into your web root, and that's how you configure this service. So here's my Lando config, here's my Probo config, and here is my Pantheon config, right?
Yeah,
Some of us still hide behind dots in the configuration file names.
Yes, and the Lando config file is nice when you work with Pantheon sites. It's smart, so it'll see that you have a Pantheon site. It'll look for the Pantheon.yaml file, and it'll use the values in the Pantheon.yaml file, so you don't have to have like say the PHP version in two different places. You can just use the one that Pantheon has.
Right. So here's my Pantheon.yaml file. I specified PHP version 7.2.
Right, and that's what Lando will use.
And then that's why the Lando file is so simple. And Lando already knows a lot about Pantheon, so it's going to set up a whole local environment that's a lot like the Pantheon environment. This is all, actually Lando is so great that you don't even have to write this YAML file. I think it's like, it just asks you some questions and it writes it for you. But if you did write it, really wouldn't be that hard because there's only a few lines here.
Yeah, if you could spell, you should be good.
Yep. So it really just is kind of like the name of my Pantheon site. And then it gets everything. I guess it's just going to take forever to get the database because
yeah, and so to expand on like the Lando Pantheon integration, as Jody mentioned, there's these nice utility pull and push commands. There's also a switch command, so you can toggle between different multi-dev environments. But like it's also worth pointing out that infrastructure-wise, like Lando is like probably the closest facsimile that one can have to actually running a site on Pantheon. And what that means is that we have the same version of Nginx, we have the same version of PHP, we have the same version of Solar. It works in the same way as the Pantheon Solar instance, the same version of Redis that Pantheon has. And we honor a lot of the same Pantheon conventions for environmental variables and those kinds of things. So it sort of is like building Pantheon on your computer.
Just making it work on Linux, Mac, and Windows all at the same time.
That's right, yeah.
Well, this is the promise of containerization, is that you can, if you provide the same specification, it shouldn't matter what your like actual CPU runtime is. It should be the same code running in the same way on a local computer, on a server, on a test infrastructure. And that avoids this problem of like, it worked on my local, or it worked on QA, but it didn't work on live. Because those are horrible facepalm moments that are really hard to debug. And the more you can do to make your dev environment the same as your production, the less of these it worked on dev and not on live instances you have, which improves overall health and well-being.
So if you want to run your drush commands on Lando, you just can run Lando drush and then the name of the command. So I'm going to do that. The other commands I like on Lando that I tend to use a lot, Lando MySQL drops me into MySQL prompt. Sometimes I use Lando SSH. That drops me into the app server.
Yeah, the app server container. You can pass in a flag and drop into any of the containers in your thing, and that allows you to do bashy things or read files or install additional packages, that sort of thing.
Well, let me get. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it didn't really. Here. Sometimes I gotta clear the cache, perhaps.
Yeah, and these Lando commands are actually like highly configurable too. So you can sort of define your own commands. So you could, in your Lando YAML file, you could say, I want to sort of similar to like a composer script or a node script. You can say, I want to define a command called like Lando build my app, and you can have it run a series of commands in different containers. So that might be like, okay, like Lando build, what's that going to do? It's going to run composer install, then it's going to run npm install somewhere, then it's going to maybe pull my database down. So you can automate a lot of these like common steps and make them repeatable, which is nice because then your documentation becomes super portable. It's like just do these 3 steps on all your projects and it'll work. Very nice.
Okay, so say I'm trying to do something that I got a client request. The client says, to kind of state the obvious here, this site is a little loud. It's a little too purple and green, and I'm getting a little, this is too much here. So we want to tone it down a little bit. So they asked me to tone it down. I'm not a designer, so I'm just going to do something terrible. So I'm going to make a change, and then I'm going to, the next thing I'm going to want to do is get their feedback. So here is when Probo is going to come into the mix. So let me go over to my GitHub. I like to do my GitHub only workflow. So here is my same code base here. And just to kind of speed things up instead of, doing it all elsewhere, I want to tone it down a little bit, the whole thing. So, oops, here. Let's find some CSS and just straight edit it like a crazy person. All right, so.
Well, aside from being able to use all of GitHub's collaboration tools for doing coding with this project, part of having your code in GitHub and your container specification allows you to sort of set up these kind of automatic testing approaches. And then you can use one kind of like GitHub like organization to manage all of your different different sites, and then those sites can be hosted in different places. They can use different testing infrastructures, and people can use best-in-class tools to actually collaborate on it, which is a pretty good way.
Okay, so I changed the opacity of the whole site to 0.6. I think that's really gonna tone it down. And then now what I'm going to do is make a new pull request. Not going to send it straight up to master because I want to get feedback on it first. So I'm going to make a new pull request here. Test request, test PR. Don't merge. Okay, and now Probo is going to start running. So Probo runs whenever you make a pull request. So it integrates with GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. So since I have enabled Probo on this project, it's going to follow the steps I configured in my Probo YAML file and spin up a whole environment for me that's like a disposable environment right now. So it's working on that right now. So let me click on this link. Okay, so it's running. Here's the Probo app. The first thing it does is it gets the code from GitHub. Then it installs Terminus, which is a Pantheon tool, because it's going to need to get the latest database from Pantheon in order to make the most accurate testing environment. So it's going to be getting the latest backup from Pantheon. It's going to be doing everything that you would typically do when you do a deployment with Drupal. So that means configuration imports, update.php functions, clearing caches, anything else that you want. This one is also going to like completely index all the Solar index. So we have like everything perfectly indexed there. So everything that you would do as part of a deployment, it's going to do. And one of the nice things about that is, to me, like everything is about deployment. Like deployment is the most important part of the workflow because it's the part that everyone freaks out about. Everything's at risk. You have the chance of ruining the site at that time. So you don't want to. You want to be constantly practicing your deployment, right? You don't want when you deploy it live to be the first time that you've tried deploying it. You want to have deployed it over and over again and already worked out all the problems because you knew that that was such an important thing to be practicing.
That's a good plan.
So this is sort of a practice deployment, and it's probably finished by now. So let me open up this link. The other thing you can do in Probo that's pretty cool, it like Lando and Pantheon, it's also based on Docker and containers. So you get your own, you can open up an SSH terminal right here in your browser, drop right into your Probo container, and then you can debug things and kind of practice like what you need it to run in terms of its like deployment steps and kind of see exactly what's going on there. So here's my Probo site. All right, I guess it has more of an opacity, I would say, than before.
It's less aggressive.
Yeah. So here you see it has sort of an obscure URL. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take that URL, pop it into an email or a Slack or give it to my PM or whatever. And I'm going to send this to the client. Like, so how do you like this? You think that looks better? And the interesting thing here is a lot of times people talk about, oh, Probo is a testing tool. I like to talk about it more as either a collaboration or a feedback tool. Because a lot of what we're doing, we're making websites. We're not making Mars rovers here. A lot of what we're doing is asking for subjective feedback about, hey, do you like the way this looks better? You know, it's not really like we're like always having to like test like really complicated functionality. A lot of it is just like, can you guys tell me if that was what you meant before I merge it? Because once I've merged it, in order to put it on dev for you to look at, now I'm in this pipeline heading towards production where it's really a pain to unmerge it. You know, it's nice to merge things in Git, but how do you unmerge them? It's not as easy. you have to kind of like go through, cherry pick out things, and it's this whole annoying thing. So better to not merge them until everybody says it's definitely good to go. And that's how we get more of like a continuous deployment situation going on.
And this is where the world of web development is moving. If you're not currently using branches, if you're not using these tools, not necessarily on the command line, but like tools that leverage this stuff, like this is where all the serious web development works, because we want to have people look at unique URLs, make business decisions about if they're good or bad, and then merge them or not merge them depending on that feedback. And then so much of the modern web is not only just about building things people want, but also like creating situations where you can do testing, or you can have different like accessibility groups review things, or you can create these like worlds where you can like compare A and B and pick the one you want. And being able to quickly generate versions of these things is a very good plan.
Yeah, being able to get that really quick client feedback is super important. I mean, the fact that like Jody just go in and like make an edit in the GitHub like UI and like get a pull request branch environment spun up in like less than 3 minutes is great. I mean, if you have a spec that's unclear from the client, it's really easy to just go in there and say like, hey, is this what you meant? Like, is this what we're talking about here? Or am I way off?
Or we could say, hey, there's a couple of different modules that you might like for this solution. Let me make you an environment using this one. Let me make you an environment using this one. Even I'll put some test content on it, and I'll send you both of them and see what you think.
And they're completely disposable, so it doesn't matter. You can get rid of it. You can merge it in if you want.
You don't have to do any clean. That's what I like about it. You have to go back and delete them later. They're just disposable. So here's the all the latest builds for this project, and it deletes if you merge the pull request, it'll automatically delete them. So that's why there's only a few here, because there's only a few like outstanding to be reviewed right now. But you can also see there's like this pin button. So if there's something where you put a bunch of test content on it, and you want to make sure it doesn't just get automatically deleted because like somebody really needs to do something on that test environment, you can pin it in order to kind of like make it a little bit more permanent until you unpin it. So that's nice too. So yeah, one of the things that we really try to emphasize with Probo is speed. Like, if it takes a half an hour or more to make a build, sometimes you're sitting there waiting for that half an hour because you can't go home until you can like send someone with the information and make sure it worked right? So if we can make it build in 2 minutes, it just enables you to move a lot faster. Okay, so once they are happy with the change, then you're going to go to that pull request and you're going to merge it. This one's actually already merged, but it was pinned, that's why it didn't go away. You're going to press merge, and that's going to merge, and then that's going to be a master, and it'll go straight up to our friend Matt at not that, but at Pantheon.
And this is after client review, and this is also after like any kind of automatic test that might go on. I think one thing that saved me a lot of time when I've done web development tasks is being able to take things like doing like very basic visual regression testing to determine what pixels changed and put that into my workflow. Or using an open source solution like Google Lighthouse to like give me an accessibility and a performance metric depending on how good my commit was. Or doing extremely like functional or behavioral testing using like VHAT to actually work through different kinds of like behaviors people might have on the website. Because I think one of the powers of Drupal is that you can like build out these like very complicated sites and like fiddle some like content settings here and some view settings here and make 300 pages work the way you think it should work. The problem is that sometimes if you like fiddle something over here, it can break something on another part of the site. And being able to build tests that can say, look, let me make a test to make sure the search always works. Because when you do a deployment, you might look at the opacity and be like, oh, well, that looks great. But maybe like that opacity breaks some kind of like newsletter pop-up box on some other page and like you can't actually click on anything. Having test coverage makes that process really fast. And Probo is really fast to get sort of your test going, and then you just do a little, it's pretty fast to do some of these tests. And you can save yourself so much time. Because if you spend all this time building something, you build a big slideshow gallery where you add pictures and they show up. Like writing a lot of test along with that feature is small time compared to the build time. But it guarantees that every time you sort of make a change, that like there's the thing that you spent all this time building is still going to be working and still going to be functional. And like the robots can do all this for you. Like automation is going to be a problem. It's going to basically destroy our economy. The robots will rise up. But in the meantime, we can create this world where like all this repetitive stuff that we like might have had to do previously as developers, we can have the robots do instead. And that if you find yourself doing QA thing and finding something broken 1, 2, 3 times, writing a test for it is very excellent to sort of get that.
So one thing I wanted to show real quick, in terms of like feedback and Probo, I've been using this thing called User Snap that seems pretty cool. It's like it's a service, right? And it gives you this, there's actually a Drupal module for it, or you can use it as like a browser plugin. And if I hit this button, it actually is taking a screenshot of this page, and then I can kind of make little notes on it and put in my email and send my message. Way too opaque. What are you thinking? And then I can send that, and that is going to give the feedback to the development team in a way that's a lot better than the typical feedback that you get, where usually when you get feedback from a client, you're like, what URL are you talking about? Can you give me a screenshot? What browser? So here's the an example of what we're getting from this user snap. This is exactly what, so it says the address information is confusing, maybe move this, and they've got this, and it says they were on Safari, Mac, and what date this was from, and who reported this. I got everything that I need right here. And it's really easy for them to send me that good feedback. Okay, so
Is it a paid service?
it is a paid service. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. Probo is a paid service. But there is an open source version if you hate your life and want to try to set that all up.
Don't just buy it.
Pantheon is a paid service, but it's free until you launch, so you can always develop on it and then decide later what you want to do. And then this guy, totally free.
Totally free.
Lando.
Fuck my life.
Praise and speech.
So buy him a beer. So now that brings us up to Pantheon, and this is where the code will go once it gets up to the dev site. And then we have the test site where we're moving it next. And then finally, we will move it up to the live site. So we have gone all the way from local to live.
And how many people here are using DevTest Live as part of what they're doing for their projects? And is that something you've been doing for a while? Feels good? Because I feel like that's having that kind of especially when DevTest Live are basically the same kind of thing. There's a lot of confidence in that. On the test page, Jody, if you go to there, that functionality is probably one of the, clicking that button, deploy code, is extremely powerful, because what it does, especially at a live site, is that it's going to take all of the code that you've sort of tested, reviewed, and merged to be ready to go live, and it's going to take that code, it's going to put it on your test site. And then it's also, if you have a live database, it's going to take the live database and the live files and copy those to your test site. And then it's going to make sure your test site has all the same versions of PHP and database spec as the live site. It's going to run update.php, it's going to clear the caches. And then it's going to run any other custom code you want to run. It could migrate content, or it could turn on or off modules, or it could run a performance scan. And it's going to go through all that, and then and only then is it going to say, check it out. Because the thing is, if you've ever had a deployment go off the rails, and I've had a lot of them in my career, it's stressful as all get out. If you don't have if you have to look, you're pushing it up and hoping that it works. Like that's a scary place to be, especially if the more important sites, the scarier it is. And I think that, especially in the world of Drupal 8, like the kinds of projects that Drupal 8's attracting are bigger, bigger budget, bigger ongoing relationships, big universities, big companies. Like, you gotta get this stuff right. And like, if you push something to a site that you haven't tested or haven't fully tested it, it's gonna be totally disastrous. And that's why having, like someone who's done hosting for Pantheon's obviously great in my view, but plenty of other hosting companies offer these kinds of services just because they've done this a lot. And I think trying to do it yourself can be total madness.
Yeah, and when we designed the Lando Pantheon integration, we basically just copied this exact model. Like, why do anything different? So when we built it, we were just like, let's extend dev, test, and live to 4 things, and now we have local dev, test, and live, and it should function exactly the same way. So you should literally think about it as just an extension of your normal Pantheon dashboard.
And then, the other thing is, whenever you finally push the code to dev, or you push it to test or to live, those are also, each one of those is a deployment. Even if it's not going live, you're deploying it to dev, then you're deploying it to test. So it's important to make sure that you've automated those deployments as well, which you can do in your Pantheon.yaml file. So that is using, what's this stuff called? Quicksilver. So here this is saying when I do a deployment to any of the environments, I'm going to import configuration, do other deployment tests, and I'm defining that in a PHP file here. And when I sync code, like from live to dev, I'm also going to do those same types of things. So that way, nobody ever forgets, did you import the config changes? No, it's always correct.
And that's critical to make a lot of this work, is using Drupal 8's configuration management system to its fullest makes these kind of automatic testing and deployments possible. Because if you can have all the fancy tooling you want, but at the end of the day you click deploy, and then you have to log into the site and like import a view or like change a field and hit save and hope it works, like you haven't really created a full automatic workflow. Drupal 8 configuration management, however, allows you to, like, inside of your local dev, like, get your view right, get your content fields right, get those all saved, and then when they deploy, it's simply a matter of running a little code that all does run drush config import -y, and suddenly now you have a new copy of the site with all that new functionality.
Yeah, and the like, sort of event-driven automation is really, really powerful. It's so easy to, like, it's nice to document, like, okay, after I clone my database down, I need to, like, clear the drush cache, then import the config, and then do all this other stuff. But this is forgotten very easily. So if you could just have that automatically run, so for example, in Lando, there's like a db import command that you can run, and you can set it up so after a db import, Lando will automatically import your configuration and automatically clear your caches. And this can happen in all sorts of other areas as well. So like automatically compile my SAS after I start my site, these kinds of things. Very, very easy to automate these steps, very, very easy to do it, and it saves you tons and tons of pain because people will forget to run these if they're not automated.
Psyched.
So, but in speaking of pain, I think one thing that is certainly my expertise that I want to sort of chat with you all about is production hosting, because one of the things that definitely can happen for folks is that you can get into a situation where you're like responsible for creating a site, and then people try to go to it and it has trouble. But this is just me not typing this correctly. Thank you. And one of the things that I think I like to talk about with Pantheon, I made this demo to show it off using D3, which is excellent, is that like the modern like hosting situation for websites is one where you really have to have a whole network of different sites connecting together. So if you're running even a small kind of site, putting some kind of CDN in front of whatever website hosting you have is like an essential part of like getting the internet fast and secure. And so part of what we do with Pantheon, and you can do with other kind of CDN providers, is make sure that like everyone who tries to go to your site first looks to get a local cache copy of it somewhere in the world. Because most of the websites that we build are things that need to be dynamic. We need to be able to like change some stuff here and have it like pop up. But if 1 million people go to my blog post, they're just going to see the same blog post. It's not like unique for each. The words don't change for each person. And so one of the things that you can do to make your sites really fast is saying, well, because we've got this like pesky restraint around the speed of light, that we need to have like people like copies of our site in more places so that like if I'm in Europe or if I'm in a different part of America or from Australia, I can see a local version of this. And so things like Cloudflare, CloudFront, Pantheon works with Fastly, but Fastly are organizations that basically say, you have a Drupal website, we'll put this CDN in front to make sure all of your traffic goes through. And that the other piece of sort of building out these websites is that you really have this sort of like containerized approach to actually building what you want. And that this is sort of how this stuff ends up working together. Like you have these PHP application containers that as you get like bigger and bigger sites, you'll actually start scaling out by creating new versions of them. And this is something that like in the past you didn't end up doing. Like if you were like just hosting a website and you needed a bigger one, you'd be like, let me just get a bigger EC2 instance or a bigger slice of VPS RAM or something like that. But one of the limitations that Drupal as a CMS architecture has is that like you have a lot of requests, you can sort of round robin those requests with inside of this PHP process. So the first person runs on this PHP container, the next one runs on this, the next one runs on this, and so on. And this is how you create these modern websites that like can have like crazy amounts of traffic because it's very easy in software to create as many PHP instances as you want. And that's part of, I think, creating very sort of like good workflow is ending up in a position where you're able to service as much traffic as you want.
How many like PHP instances does like Pantheon's largest website have? Is it like hundreds or thousands or like
dozens usually?
Dozens.
Yeah, like and this is the thing. Sometimes this kind of stuff comes out of nowhere. So like at Pantheon, we do a lot of like political, like we do a lot of like presidential campaign websites, and we do a lot of like nonprofits. Like ACLU is a really good example where they're hosting our infrastructure. And when these like flashpoint political actions come up, where like they're in the news, or there's a court case, or there's a travel ban, like people go to that website in mass to donate money or just to learn what's going on. And that those are things that you can't always predict ahead of time. And so if you've got hosting that's sitting somewhere where it's just like one server, and to like make more hosting, you have to like call somebody who's gonna get another server and set it up, or even if someone's gonna log into EC2 and add something else manually, sometimes that process can be like you'll go down. Your website will literally like just get off the internet. And that's like the worst thing, because at the moment when your website is getting the most attention is the time where it has to stay online. And so yeah, for some customers, when you're talking about like a highest traffic moment, like the day they announce for president, for example, you just get tons of traffic all over. But that's no problem because Drupal, when you structure it like this, works really well. We also sort of at Pantheon, we also built our own file system to scale out over this, but you can do this in other network file system ways. And then leveraging like the Google Cloud, you can create these database servers that also are that way. But we live in a world too where like things are a little bit uneven. So like, one of the things you'll have to think about is, look, you have, whole data centers can go offline, whole data centers can have problems. So in some cases, you actually want to have an entirely failed over architecture. And being able to set it up so that I can have like my databases and my file system living in one data center, and then have a failover ready to go if there's some kind of problem. Like this is how you get sites like online all the time. And I think that's not going to be true for every site for sure, but you never really know how big your project is going to get because you're working on a bunch of different stuff, and having those capabilities are really good. Because Drupal just has a bunch of different sites that all like work in different ways. And I think like part of what I've seen just in like web hosting world is that like not one size doesn't always fit all, but you're better off trying to find some standard way to deal with things. Because at the end of the day, like your time is your time. You're trying to build cool features. You're trying to like iterate for your clients, your business, or just your organization on their goals. And the more time you spend mucking around with local development, trying to figure out the testing structures right, trying to make sure the production infrastructure works, it's just less time you have spending on doing the work you need to do for the websites. Or, or other stuff you want to do with your life. We have way more important things to do in this world. So that's part of why we vibe for tools we have, and part of why I want to share with you today.
I think we're running out of time, but we got to do some closing session where maybe they'll tell us where this party is or whatever.
Speaking of other things, speaking of things we want to do besides.
So any questions as we wrap it up? I don't know where I hosted my party. Do you?
No, it's down by the brag house.
Okay. So no burning questions? Everybody's? Yeah, go ahead.
I had one about Lando. I've been bouncing back and forth between Lando and Drupal VMs because VM is what I do.
Boo!
I actively want
No,
to
it's fine. It's fine.
But
Drupal VM is a great solution.
well, one issue that I keep running into, that I'm sure has to be me doing something wrong, is a lot of times just because we're sort of in between different solutions, a lot of us on our team will run our front-end compiling tools on the host, and they don't always sync into the container. So I have the issue where like my CSS or my JavaScript will compile, and it shows it's compiled, but it doesn't reflect in the browser, or if I SSH in. So you usually have to like do a Lando rebuild every so often. Why?
So there is no like syncing mechanism that Lando has. It's just network file sharing. So any file that you change on your computer is going to end up in the host because they're the same file. So I don't know the specifics of your situation. I think the more likely explanation is there's some sort of cached activity happening in the application layer that's preventing those changes from surfacing. So the easiest way to check that out would be make the change and then just run like drush clear caches or whatever and see if it shows up.
Which I've usually done, and it doesn't have any impact.
Yeah, and if you're using like if you're using like a Java, like if you're using like Vue or something, some JavaScript front end to surface your site, then you're going to want to make sure that it's set up so that when files there's some sort of watch task. So when a file is changed, the application is restarted with the new change.
It's not on Windows, is it?
No. OS X.
OS X, yeah.
Well, I have a lot less problems in my life since I switched to Linux.
And there's a, I can tell you with certainty, it's not a file sharing or file syncing issue. It's some sort of caching issue. Just where the caching is happening is the problem. If, like, for example, if you're serving like a static asset through Nginx, I think our Nginx by default is set up to have those with maximum expiration time. So if you're serving your front end through a static JavaScript file and that file changes, like Nginx will not reflect that change. So you would have to make that. You would have to change that manually, which you can. So there are many places. My point is there are many places where this could be happening, but almost for sure it's happening somewhere in like the infrastructure or the application layer. It's not in the actual file syncing or file sharing. Because the only circumstance where that doesn't work is if the actual Docker daemon crashes completely. In which case you will notice it other places.
Well, what if I volunteered Mike to look at it for you?
Mike would be upset.
So you're saying cache invalidation is a hard problem.
I think that I'm saying that this is an off by one error.
I mean, even like the browsers are doing more caching. Like I remember over the last like 6 months or so, Chrome seems to be just caching more and more stuff. Where in some cases I have to run like a hard refresh versus just a refresh because the browser itself is caching.
Yeah. There's definitely many layers in here where this could be getting caught up. But I definitely don't think that it's the file sharing part of it, which is not even Lando. That's just something that Docker does for us. So I think my recommendation to you would be to look, if there is no application, turn all the application caches off, and then look at your web server and see if it's serving files that have maximum expiration time.
All right, let's go to this closing session. Thanks, everybody.